One of the great advantages of living in our society is that we live in a rational age, a place where reason rules supreme. That's a product, really, of the Enlightenment of the 18th century. What the Enlightenment did for us was it made sure that everything is governed, that society is governed, not by superstition or by arbitrary rules, but by reason. And that is the nature of our society, which marks it out as something which makes great progress in the world. I suppose the kingpin of reason is science, and it generated science, the scientific method, the way in which we make progress, and the reason why we have things like computers, video, YouTube, and all those things available to us today is because of the remarkable power of science built on the power of reason. And reason is simply a tool which enables us to correspond our thinking very closely with reality. That's how it works so well. Before the Enlightenment, everything was subject to arbitrary rules and arbitrary injunctions. We were governed by maybe the whim of kings or dictators who would just say what they wanted things to do, and that would happen, and that would be it. There wouldn't be any rhyme or reason for it. Sometimes we'd be governed by mere bias or by prejudice. Very often that would be the case, that people's emotions would rule things rather than reason. And indeed, you find superstition would often be behind many of the decisions that were made, and sometimes faith in a particular religion or a particular point of view, which didn't have any evidence or support or rationality behind it. So that was what the Enlightenment provided for us, a move from unreason to reason. But what I find most fearful about today and the world that we're creating for ourselves at the moment is we seem to be moving into a post-Enlightenment age. And that's a very frightening thing to do. It's a return to unreason, which I see around me in many places, a return to arbitrary rules, a return to irrationality, a return to bias, a return to prejudice, a return to the governing by emotion and by feeling rather than by reason and by sense and perspective. And as a consequence of that, we find that even in this COVID world that we've got, we're governed by rules and by of a seemingly arbitrary nature. It seems to me that, we've become dangerously unhinged and irrational at times about the way in which we think about things, all because we've lost the Enlightenment principle of reason and rationality. We live in an age where the unvaccinated are said to be a danger to the vaccinated. Strangely enough, we live in a world where masks which don't stop the spread of aerosols which carry a virus are mandatory in our society, but it's irrational nevertheless. We live in a world where a 2 meters distance is essential for stopping the transmission of a disease, but in reality it will make no difference at all if you're on a bus for 2 hours or a train for that long or in a restaurant or whatever. All of this are arbitrary imposition of rules with very little thinking behind them. And we also live in a wider context, in a society which seems to have jettisoned ideas about science. Biology has been changed, or sex doesn't make any difference. It's a society now where a man can transition to a woman, and if you don't believe that, then you're outside the pale and not thought to be part of society, despite the fact that biology will tell you that cannot be the case. And then there's a case where Black Lives Matter, but in our society, all lives do not matter. Another irrationality, which doesn't make any sense. And we're fast moving into an area where Orwell's prediction that the society will be governed by entirely arbitrary rules and that you must give assent to them, otherwise you can't be a member of that society. And poor old Winston had to confess at the end of the book that 2 + 2 did equal 5. And that was the mark of his acceptance, that he would accept irrationality, that he would accept whatever it was that society told him, not because it was true anymore, not because it was reasonable, not because it was rational, but because it made him acceptable to everybody else who lived in an irrational, unenlightened world. Truth is that we're moving rapidly towards that. In fact, you probably have to say that we're pretty well there now.